We are swimming in data. It's everywhere. But does all that information actually make us any wiser? How do we make sense of it all? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful idea from Scott Page's book, The Model Thinker. It's all about building a mental toolkit to help us cut through the noise and see our complicated world with a ton of new clarity.
And this really is the central problem, isn't it? We're just drowning in information. Every single day we get hit with data, news, opinions. But here's the thing. More information doesn't automatically make us wiser. In fact, a lot of the time, it just leads to more confusion and makes it even harder to figure out what to do.
You know, the poet T.S. Eliot asked this question almost 100 years ago, and it's more relevant now than ever. It just perfectly captures the challenge we're facing. How do we climb our way up from all this raw, messy information to a place of real, genuine understanding?
People often think about it like this: wisdom hierarchy. So at the very bottom, you've got raw data, just random facts and figures. You organize that and you get information. You start seeing patterns in that information and hey, now you've got knowledge. But that last step up to the peak, that's wisdom. And here's the big idea from Page's work. Wisdom isn't just about knowing a bunch of stuff. It's about knowing which mental tool or model to pull out to make sense of the problem in front of you.
So how do we get that kind of wisdom? Well, it's not about searching for one single perfect model that explains the entire world. That's a fool's errand. The real secret is to become a many-model thinker, to build a whole toolkit of different mental frameworks that you can use on any problem that comes your way.
And why is that so important? Because, and this is key, any single model is just a simplification. It's one story, it's one way of looking at things, and every single story has blind spots. So if you rely on just one model to understand something really complex, like the economy, politics, or even just a decision at work, you are guaranteed to be missing huge parts of the picture. You become that person with a hammer who thinks every problem is a nit.
So, what does this toolkit actually look like? Page gives us some fantastic metaphors. Think of it like a quiver full of different kinds of arrows for different targets, or a doctor's bag of diagnostic tools, right? You wouldn't use a stethoscope to check someone's eyesight. Each model is a specific tool for a specific job. And the magic, the real insight, happens when you can look at one problem through several of these lenses at the same time. That's when things start to snap into focus.
Okay, so enough theory, let's make this real. Let's pull 3 totally different models out of this toolkit and see how they actually work.
First up, we have the predator-prey model. This one comes from a field called systems dynamics, which is all about feedback loops and how things influence each other over time. The classic example is foxes and hares. Their populations are locked in this invisible dance. When there are more hares, there's more food, which means more foxes. But what happens next? More foxes eat more hares, so the hare population drops, which in turn means the fox population drops. It's a cycle, a self-regulating system that can be full of surprises.
So here's a question for you. Let's say you're a wildlife manager, and you want to help the poor hares. So you come up with a brilliant plan to make them reproduce faster. Your gut instinct says, the hare population's going to explode, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, you'd think so, but check this out. The model shows us something totally counterintuitive. In the long run, the hare population doesn't really go up at all. It's the fox population that grows. Why? Because all those extra baby hares just became a bigger buffet for the foxes, allowing their population to boom and eat up the surplus. And that's the power of a model like this. It shows you the hidden consequences that your intuition would totally miss.
Okay, let's switch gears. From ecology, let's jump over to economics and sociology with our next tool, the signaling model. This one is all about how we prove things about ourselves. In a world where you can't always trust what people say, this model explains how we use our actions to send believable messages about our skills, our dedication, or even how wealthy we are.
And the model makes a really important distinction here. For a signal to be believable, it has to be costly. It has to be hard to fake. I mean, anybody can say, I can speak Spanish, right? That's what the model calls cheap talk. It costs nothing and it proves nothing. But getting a PhD, now that is a costly signal. The years of hard work, the money, the effort, that's what makes the signal credible. It's the cost that carries the real message.
Okay, tool number 3. This one helps explain why the world is the way it is. It's called the Polias-Earn model, and it demonstrates a powerful idea called path dependence. Basically, it's the concept that history matters, that tiny, random events early on can lock in huge outcomes later. So imagine an urn with some colored balls. You pull one out, you note the color, and then you put it back, along with another ball of the same color. Whichever color gets a small, lucky head start at the beginning is going to become more and more likely to be picked again.
Over time, it almost inevitably dominates the whole ERN. This helps explain everything from why we still use the QWERTY keyboard layout to why one tech company becomes the standard. Early chance events create a snowball effect.
So we have these very different tools. A predator-prey model, a signaling model, a path dependence model. How do they actually work together on a real-world problem? Let's put the toolkit to the ultimate test on one of the biggest, thorniest issues we face: income inequality.
Just think about the conversations you hear about income inequality. People usually grab onto one single cause. They'll say, oh, it's technology, or it's globalization, or it's bad policy. But a model thinker knows better than to fall for a simple answer. Instead, they open their toolkit and start laying different models on top of each other, because they know the real answer is in how these different forces interact.
So, let's start with lens number 1, the technology model. This is a common one in economics. The idea is that as technology, like software and automation, gets better, it massively increases the demand for highly skilled people who can build and run those systems. At the same time, it might reduce the need for lower skilled work, so you get this race between education and technology, and it naturally pulls the income gap wider.
All right, now let's add a second lens. This one was made famous by the economist Thomas Piketty, and it's a super powerful formula: R greater than G. R is the rate of return on capital. That's money you make from owning things, like stocks or property. G is the growth of the whole economy, which is mostly about wages from labor. When R is consistently bigger than G, it means wealth at the top is growing faster than income for everybody else. It's like a quiet, relentless engine that concentrates wealth.
Okay, here's a third lens, and this one might be a bit of a surprise. It comes from sociology, and it's called assortative mating. Basically, it means people are more and more likely to marry someone who is a lot like them, especially when it comes to education and income. So when a high-earning doctor marries a high-earning lawyer, you're not just combining two people, you're merging two giant incomes into one powerhouse household. This trend by itself amplifies inequality.
And for our final lens, let's look at mobility, or really the lack of it. This model shows us how much stickiness there is between generations. A parent's income level has a huge impact on their kid's future income. A child born to a high-income parent has about a 60% chance of being a high earner themselves, but a child born to a low-income parent, they have a 70% chance of staying right there. So while people can and do move up and down, the strongest force is just staying put. So what's the big takeaway? It's not that one of these models is the right answer and the others are wrong. The point is that they are all happening at the same time. They're not competing ideas, they're interlocking parts of a bigger machine. Technology is pulling incomes apart, while capital is accumulating at the top, which then gets reinforced by who we marry, and all of it is made worse by the lack of mobility between classes. See, that's the richer, fuller picture you only get with a many-model approach.
Learning to see the world this way isn't just some neat intellectual exercise. It's a genuinely practical skill. It changes how you approach problems, and it completely changes the kinds of questions you start to ask.
I love this quote from Wallace Stevens because it really captures the right attitude. Complexity isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's what makes life and everything else so interesting. The goal isn't to find some simple answer that erases all the complexity, but to build a toolkit that lets you actually engage with it and appreciate how it all fits together.
And so that brings the final question back to you. Think about a complex problem in your own world. Maybe it's climate change. Maybe it's politics in your office. Maybe it's just a tough career choice. How might you see it differently now? What hidden feedback loops, what costly signals, what path dependencies might be shaping that situation? Asking that question, that's your first step to becoming a model thinker.